Thank you very much. Welcome everyone to ACDE number 210. We'll briefly touch on Pectra today. Hopefully nothing has come up since the announcement. Then a lot of final Fusaka discussions around some tweaks to the scope. And to wrap up, we have some stuff on history expiry to discuss. But yeah, to kick us off, so we announced the Pectra client releases yesterday on the Ethereum Foundation blog. If you haven't seen the announcement, I'll post it in the chat. It's also linked in the agenda. Pectra will be forking mainnet on May 7th at 10:05 UTC. This is at the start of epoch 364032. So if you're listening to this and you have not updated your client yet, you should go to this blog post and do so. Yeah, it has all the latest releases. There's also some overview of the different features, and then there's a watch party that is scheduled for the fork that's listed in the blog post. Anyone have any updates or concerns or anything around Pectra? Yeah, Barnabas?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so in the past couple of weeks, I've been testing the MEV workflow for Pectra, and there has been quite some bugs and fixes coming to the relay, the MEV boost, and to the R builder as well. And so far, it has gained a bunch of improvements in the past couple of weeks, and we have solid block production now through MEV boost.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Perry, is that what you were going to share as well?
No, independently, we're also just using all the client releases, the latest ones, to make sure that all the typical code paths, including East as well as validator lifecycle tests, are passing. So far, they seem good. The only test left is EL triggered exits, and a few other ones we're still adding. And once that's done, I think early next week, we'll plan a shadow fork. So we should have some information on that by ACD next week.
Awesome. Thanks. Anything else on Pectra? Cool. Well, yeah, great work, everyone, getting the releases out. Hopefully things go smoothly for the next 2 weeks and on the actual upgrade.
Like,
oh.
why here?
Oh, sorry, I just muted you, Gary. Okay, sweet. Next up on the agenda. So Fusaka, yeah, first of all, there was something to figure out on the BPO forks configurations. So let's maybe start there. I don't know if Alex is on the call to discuss this.
Yeah,
oh, yes.
I am. It was mainly just a reminder to sort out the EL configuration format for the BPO EIP. I believe we have configuration we like on the CL side, and I'm not sure if we've decided yet on the EL side what we want to do.
I haven't seen anything. And so this is basically what we would add in the EL to say at time slot X, we raise the block counts to A, time slot Y, we raise the block counts to B.
Right. Yeah, there was a proposal somewhere. I'd have to go find it on Discord.
Okay. And is there a reason why we shouldn't? So I know that on the CL side, doing like, quote, real hard forks is quite complicated, and therefore we have this BPO schedule. But is there a reason why the EL shouldn't just treat these as like hard forks and use the Genesis or the like, yeah, fork config files? Or Marius, so you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think Felix also wanted to say something.
Yeah. Oh, I think Felix, we just hear you typing, but we can't hear you speaking.
Okay, maybe he doesn't. But You guys can hear me, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So from my point of view, it should definitely be scheduled like a normal fork on the EL side. That it makes no sense to invent another mechanism that can have other bugs and it can have weird like interplays with our normal fork timeline. I understand why the ECL kind of needs to do it, but I would propose for the EL to have them as normal forks that are normally scheduled with a new fork ID. So we, similar to what we did with the Glacier stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So what I guess what Alex posted in the chat. I don't know how standard this is across clients, but it gives a overall picture. Like, is that something EL clients would be fine with? Or if any EL client would have an issue just adding this as a hard fork, like difficulty bomb hard fork. That's the time. Yeah. Then.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic to Maris's point of view that maybe it's just better not to invent something new when we already have a working system.
Okay.
Regarding the proposal from that Alex posted, yeah, the only thing I would change is to remove the timestamp, because there's no real need to have the timestamp in the blob schedule because we have the timestamp for the normal fork already.
And I guess one thing that might be relevant here is after the Holeshki stuff, we discussed this way to verify parameterization of the clients for different forks. So this feels like it would be especially helpful here. Like we should have a way to make sure that, you know, all the EL clients have the same set of configs for all of the BPO forks, and that they will all activate at the same time. Ahmad?
Yeah, I think this was mentioned before, but like not all clients have the same like kind of way of activating forks. We particularly activate EIP per EIP. So if the schedule is named by fork, we will have to basically add a field for specific to say, hey, fork, whatever is actually like it is a big like. It will be ugly in the code. It will be ugly in the configs. It will be a hassle for the 8-band ops team to deal with as well, in my opinion. I would just include the timestamp in the BPO in the schedule.
Is there?
Sorry.
Yeah. So I guess there is a BPO EIP, right? Like it's a 7892, if I've got it correctly. So should we just specify this in the EIP directly to avoid any confusion? Like it doesn't seem to matter too much what we do on the EL, and like yeah, maybe there is actually something. Yeah, there is actually something in the EIP. So okay. So the EIP does not have the timestamp. It just has the target, the max, and the base fee update fraction. So, and maybe the one change. Yeah, the one change from the EIP is I don't know if these numbers that it uses for the BPO forks are actually like the timestamp that's the name of the fork. If so, that seems maybe a bit weird and maybe a bit bug prone. So I would maybe just change the like config name to be something like BPO1, BPO2 or whatever, but would that work for everyone? And yeah, for clarity, so what I just posted in the chat, which is copied from the EIP, basically keep that and then just use like some generic BPO and a number naming. No fun names. Look, if we want to change them to fun names, we can hash this out async, but we could at least use the, or if someone wants to come up with a nice convention of like easily incrementable fund names, we can do that. But I would just not use the timestamp as a name because that feels like the thing that will cause an issue on some network someday. Yeah, some. Okay, so it seems like people are okay with this. Maybe like, yeah, let's just do a quick PR to the EIP to change this to like some generic name and then move on from there. Yeah, some.
Sorry about that. I just wanted to say that a hard fork is like a drag on operations. So you have to release and like make sure it goes into time, and others have to like pull the images and sort of update. It's
No,
better
to be clear, yes, to be clear, these would all be scheduled at once. The idea is that we only schedule, like we have a single client release. Say that we do this like in September or whatever. The Aragon client release already has baked in like the next 4 BPO forks or however many we decide to do. So like, yeah, if we can call that 4 hard forks a year if we want, but the idea is that on the CL side, there's like some high fixed cost to setting up a quote real hard fork. And I don't know what exactly that entails, but someone shared the diff on a previous call and it was about 90 files changing in the clients. Whereas on the EL side, the fixed cost in terms of like code to do forks seems to be pretty minimal. So the idea was that on the EL, on the consensus layer, they can have this setup where they don't need to have this entire fork scaffolding every time, which is what the BPOs bring. But on the EL, because we don't have much fork scaffolding, we can just reschedule a bunch of forks and put them all in the same release. And yes, to Perry's point, the other idea here is that even though they're all included by default and we expect them all to activate on mainnet, if the BPOs are like a month apart or whatever, we can obviously have like an emergency hard fork that delays them or that removes the future ones if something comes up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so let's do that then. Let's okay, we'll find a better word than emergency hard fork to delay the BPOs, but like, yeah, high level, it would be like a way for us to halt this. Yeah, a BPO intervention. I like this. Okay, so yeah, like let's just change the name in the EIP to something like BPO 1, BPO 2, whatever, and then at least we'll have something to work with. And if people want to come up with a better naming scheme, we can make another change. Anything else on the BPO? Okay, thanks everyone. Okay, next up, EOF. So there's a couple of different threads here. Originally, the main thing I wanted was just the status updates to make sure we're all on the same page around where EOF is at and what the next steps are. I think we should still do this to make sure we we all have the same context. Then some concern came up in the past day or so around compiling legacy contracts and importing them as dependencies in like a post EOF world. That's made at least some of the client teams reconsider which version of EOF we should do. So we should discuss this. And then another set of concerns came from Vitalik's proposal around risk 5, where The way I kind of phrased it was that it's kind of concerning that we have a proposal to replace the EVM with something, even though we haven't already shipped EOF, and therefore we're going to ask the entire ecosystem to migrate to something new, and then potentially, a few years after that, migrate again, and whether that should make us question kind of the overall approach we have here. So I guess, maybe to start, so we all have the same context. I don't know if, Daniel, do you want to give just a quick overview of like where EOF is at right now? And
sure.
And then actually, like, if you have some context around this compiler, you can do the status, and then maybe Ben can talk about the compiler issue.
Yeah. So as far as the tests, we have the first path of tests for EOF DevNet 1. It includes all the container changes and support for TX Create. Those are actually in the main, the version 4.3, I think, of the EEST, Ethereum execution spec tests. As far as clients that pass those tests, we have 2 full clients, Besu and Geth. And as far as libraries, EVM1 passes it. And I also have a patch out for EELs to pass the test. So we have multiple clients that are passing the tests as written. And that, again, the tests were pretty good at spotting every possible place where we had any of those container changes. So I'm high confidence that we've got the changes with the tests. They'll be covered by that. If you can pass all the tests, you probably fixed all the places. That being said, we still need to do fuzzing. I got my fuzzing library updated to the new container changes, and I'm starting working on fuzzing between Geth and Besu. Fuzzing to differentially is not necessarily the best thing, because when there's a difference, how do you decide who's right? So we'll get the best feedback when we get a third client, whether that's Nethermind or Reth. It's to be determined to be best if we could have all 4. But as far as the schedule I put out for the EOF testnet plan a few months ago, I'd say we're still on schedule to launch the DevNet 1 the week that we release Pectra. So we're still there. I mean, there's still a chance that if clients are late or if bugs are discovered, that we might have to slip it out, as is the case with everything. But it looks like we're still on schedule right now with that.
Okay, thank you. And Ben, do you want to talk about the compilation issue?
Yeah, so this is about the developer experience, and upstream, I don't think we're ready to depreciate the introspection opcodes, because you can't compile Uniswap contracts, you can't compile Open Zeppelin, you can't compile Solidi. I mean, this may be perhaps a compiler thing, maybe it's pulling in too much of the libraries, but nevertheless, the developer experience isn't there yet for these opcodes to be depreciated. So the suggestion is we bring back those opcodes, and at a later stage we could do EOF supports versioning. So we could do a EOF2 second version that depreciates them, but that would be an EIP that would stand on its own and have to be rejustified at that point. But I don't think the developer experience is ready right now.
And can you expand on the compilation? This is not my area of expertise at all, but as I understand it, the issue is if you try to recompile a legacy contract as EOF, that obviously breaks in many cases, but also some...
Yeah, so it'd be like, testing whether contract length is this, greater than 0, all that sort of stuff.
And then, the other issue was something around like even legacy contracts had some concerns like bringing in, the issue is that you couldn't bring in many popular libraries like say Open Zeppelin to EOF contracts because these would not compile, right? And that's
yeah, because they use some of the depreciated features. So the idea is if you just bring those back for now, then they'll continue to work, so it'll be fine.
Yeah. So I guess
I mean, we'd still have the one of the important things of EOF, which is you can't introspect EOF contracts. You know, you'll get, oh, it's 2 bytes long. But you know, they'll how they present to legacy contracts, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Kev.
Yeah, I guess I'm a bit confused. So did we take an EOF compiler and try to compile non-EOF contracts and that broke?
Yes.
Isn't that expected? Because
Well, yeah, I mean, it's sort of expected, but because essentially pretty much everything breaks, then if that is the developer experience that we go out with, it's immediately very poor. So I'm just saying that we're not quite ready with, you know, here's Open Zeppelin that doesn't use depreciated opcodes. Here's Soladi that doesn't use it. Here's Uniswap that doesn't use it, etc.
Yeah. And so, yeah, so in practice, it would mean like all of these major libraries would have to be rewritten. Yeah. Dan?
Yeah, so from the Reth point of view, I think like this is like a super important point. Like the developer experience needs to be good, and if we can't do this, then maybe we should just like consider the alternate proposals for like fixing stack 2D and, you know, swap 1732. And just do that for now.
Thanks. Yeah, to Dano and then Ahmad.
So one of the proposals, I don't think Ben went into it much, but he mentioned it in the comment in the GitHub thread, is a couple of meetings ago, when we did the introspection options, there was an option called option D, where we would return all of these opcodes that were related to gas introspection and EXT code introspections, with the restriction that you wouldn't be able to introspect into EOF contracts, which preserves the key band code introspection for the EOF code, which was the most critical piece. So the opcodes would then be enabled inside of EOF, and if you tried to introspect an EOF contract, you get the EF00, the legacy you get the same behavior on the plain bytecode and the container bytecode experiences. So what that would do is that would then allow the contracts to be compiled directly. All these assembly blocks that depend on call, gas, ext code, copy, ext code, length and size and stuff like that. Those would all then work. But when we went with the band gas introspection, that the gas would be broken in these contracts was the design intent. So that this is the outcome of it is not terribly surprising. That is having as much friction on the developer experience is the new signal that would allow us to then go with option D and bringing those back in. And the impact of this is we would get rid of at least 2 EIPs from the call, possibly a third. We may or may not do pay. So going with option D would actually reduce some of the scope changes for Fusaka. If Frangio raised it in October, and we didn't hear it loud enough, I guess, is the mistake there.
Yeah, and maybe to Ansgar's comment around like rehashing this discussion again, I agree that like it felt like we did make a final decision, and I think the reason to bring it up again is even though this concern was like potentially raised in the past, it doesn't feel like we actually understood the implications. And so if we want to proceed, we should just be okay with this or potentially adjust.
So what this would change from EOF is the UF DevNet 1 would stay as is, as shipped. UF DevNet 2, we would get rid of most of the features and instead just enable the opcodes. And for most of the clients, that should be a really small lift because they just need to go into their tables and change a few values. And for the testing, it's actually surprisingly another small lift because all the code that we brought in from the old tests, we just have, flags disabled has this opcode, don't convert it into an EOF container test. We just change that table as well. And we then get the same test that we have in the pre-East tests, also again testing EOF. So going with this option does result in less scope and less work that needs to be done.
Ahmad, you had your hand up as well?
Yeah, so like my perspective is a little bit different than the voices that I've been hearing right now. So any upgrade that actually deprecates a certain feature in the EVM or removes a certain feature is always problematic. The fact that we will only disable these features for EOF is very interesting though, because if the developers still want to use those legacy contracts that are not EOF based, they can always use the legacy contracts. And the libraries will always upgrade to EOF to get the new features, to get the gas optimizations that EOF brings, etc. So like the worry that the current like we haven't shipped until we ship EOF, the libraries are not going to be updated to the EOF version. I don't think any company that or any entity that works on these contracts is willing to spend time to upgrade these libraries and contracts and tooling before actually we ship EOF. And the fact that we're still having a compatibility mode where the legacy contracts are still working, still deployable, plays the role here that we don't really need to care about if EOF, if these legacy contracts can be compiled to EOF or not. But yeah, that's just my perspective. Yeah,
Thanks.
but one more thing I would say is that the important thing here is to think about like why did we remove that introspection? Is removing the introspection here actually a net positive in the future? And if so, then we should continue with the removal regardless of the development experience, quote unquote, that will affect how you deploy EOF contracts. Yeah.
Thanks. Let's do Dan and then Ansgar.
Yeah, so I think like for us, it's very important that like we set the timeline for the fork and what we decide to ship around like pure DAS and like very little else. Like I think it's okay to descope things. Like I get that, we want to stick to things, but like I think we want to stick to things in that like if we've frozen a certain set of features, we shouldn't add stuff on top, like because that could extend timelines for things. But like if we notice that like okay, we want to change this thing in EOF, like we're going to like descope it, but I think that's fine. But like I don't know, North Star is pure DAS. And like whatever we have, we should be happy with. Otherwise, remove.
Yeah, I would strongly +1 this. Like I think at this point we should only make subtractive changes in a way. Like I think we don't want to reopen the entire can of worms around the design space of like potential EVM changes. If people want to tweak EOF, like maybe we can reconsider that. But I think if people want to do something completely different with the EVM, I would almost discuss that for Amsterdam and like have a much smaller scope for Fusaka on the EL side. On the guard.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, also put it in chat. I'm relatively unopinionated on the kind of the content of this change. This might be right. This maybe would be the better version of EF, but I think process-wise, I think we really should have a pretty high bar to changes here. And in particular, with these types of features in UF, we talked about this in the past. There's this huge asymmetry where, like, if we get something wrong by adding a feature that afterwards we wish we didn't have, we wouldn't have added. Now we're stuck with it forever. Whereas if we determine later that a feature is missing and it really hampers the adoption of EOF or something, we can always add that back the next fork. And yes, worst case, we do lose a few months of EOF adoption, and that is bad. I'm not saying that's not bad, obviously, but it's a very asymmetric risk situation. And so taking those two in combination, I think basically, especially given that like most people on this call now don't have the context for this decision, the people that like used to pay attention to EF, they don't know that we are now reopening the decision. I would argue we should like not change anything for Fusaka and then reconsider this question for Glamsita.
And this is because like, yeah, we can always add introspection again. We cannot remove it if we have it in EOF v1. Okay, and then Georgios just added something in the chat. So okay, so I guess
Yeah,
like yeah,
just,
on the
sorry,
okay,
I'm
go
late.
ahead.
And
No, go ahead.
oh, I think Dan maybe shared our stance, but like just want to like really drive the point home that the point of Fusaka should be scaling with peer DAS. That's the top priority of it. I was really hopeful for EOF as a general like improvement. It seems to me that we can still get the benefits of it if we get rid of the code gas introspection bans. But I think it's totally fine if we don't have the test team budget or time allocation to get things done. But if anything like ends up compromising peer DAS, I think it's going to be a gigantic failure. So it's just so important to like make sure that like whatever we ship doesn't compromise that goal.
Yeah, okay. So I think everyone seems to agree with that. I think then the question is, what's the value of shipping EOF without code introspection if like yeah, if we might be shipping a version with code introspection in the future, that just seems like it's adding more complexity. Like, and then the other part of this is if the main
like
blocker
the complexity.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, just gonna say that the complexity part I don't think is like the important thing. The important thing is that like contracts need to work and compile, and there's too much code that uses all of this stuff, right?
Yeah, and so that's yes. Then the question is, like, if we ban introspection, you know, it was always going to be clear that some contracts would have to be rewritten to support that. And is it not okay for then legacy contracts to keep using, you know, the legacy code paths? And you know, on day one, things like Open Zeppelin will not support EOF, but then potentially, you know, 6 months in the future, they will have a version of Open Zeppelin that supports EOF. So there'll be like a lag between the time, between the time that like EOF goes live and you know, the full developer experience is there. I guess maybe, oh yeah, Lukash?
So it would be good to get some opinions from the developers. How hard would it be to amend those contracts to compile to EOF, right? For example. But I don't have this data.
Yeah, Lucas, I looked into that. We've had EOF support like in Foundry for a long time, so I've looked into it multiple times. It's not that hard, but ultimately there's just every library in the ecosystem uses assembly because for call related stuff, just for ERC20, for example, because the L1 like just demanded that to happen. So I agree it might not be a lot of work, but it's still, you just cannot expect to do this. Like clone any repository that you want. Like every dev will run into this. It's going to be.
And we say because the L1 required it is like the gas cost optimizations. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Let's do Alex and then Charles.
Just wanted to highlight that in Epsilon internally we actually did change the Solidity implementation. like most of the pieces to prove that it can be compiled with UF. I'm not talking about the gas parameter, but rather the create2 style cases, which look a bit more complex to be accomplished. And those can also be accomplished with UF. And those are the pieces we have rewritten. So far, I haven't really found a feature which cannot be accomplished with UF in Solidity, but obviously it has to be changed in the source code.
And then but I assume the assembly stuff just like cannot be solved. Like it seems fundamentally impossible to.
No, I mean, these are the assembly parts. Obviously, you cannot like automatically translate the assembly part in Solidity, because the commitment of Solidity is that the assembly part is left intact. That's controlled by the author. So that's why we manually have to change it. But all of these changes I mentioned have been done in the assembly parts. None of the other parts have to be adjusted.
Okay. Charles?
Yeah, sorry if I have background noise, but I think it's also going to be a problem when people need to maintain two different source codes for like L2s that don't have UF and UF mainnet. Like I already have people complaining to me about like push 0 because they like try to deploy push 0 to like in L2 and it doesn't have it. It's going to be a much bigger deal when people are maintaining two source codes for every single project and need to like have two different audit, maintenance, and deployment paths for those codes.
Right. And I think that would be an issue regardless of the EOF version we do, though. So the code introspection is kind of orthogonal to that.
No, because EOF breaks semantic compatibility with the EU.
Okay, and then because you can bring in design, so if we have code introspection in EOF, you can bring in these libraries, and then all of the tooling should work. So I guess maybe this is the other question is, how confident are we that by doing the I believe it was version D of EOF, the introspective one, like the developer experience will actually be unaffected or good? It does seem like it took us quite some time to figure out the implications of this. So yeah, I'm pretty concerned that if we just say today, after like thinking about this for a day or two, like, oh yeah, let's just do this other version that solves our problem, in 3 months we're in the same situation. Yeah, and I guess, yeah, maybe to Ansgar's point, like how bad is it if we only have EOF support in the developer experience, sometime after Amsterdam? Like if there is actually a lag, or sorry, sometimes after Fusaka, like if there is a lag between EOF being live and being adopted, yeah, how bad is this an issue? Ben?
I mean, it would be a forcing function in a way to get people to upgrade this stuff. But we have to accept that the developer experience would be not necessarily great.
So and then to be clear, this is the EOF developer experience will be not great at first.
Yeah.
And then legacy will remain unchanged.
Yeah, so I mean the tooling would probably have to prefer legacy at the start, if you know what I mean.
So the tooling would default to legacy, and I think this is how Forge works. Like obviously today it's like you default to legacy, you have an EOF flag, and then that would probably be the case for like the foreseeable future. Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. I think you just got off. And I guess, okay, maybe the other thing is what's the cost of like waiting an extra week or two to make a final call on this? I know that we are like progressing on the dev nets, but is there something that like in the next week or two will make a major difference if we choose one way or another? Yeah, Daniel.
So this affects the EOF DevNet 2 plan. The two main one of the two main opcodes, the XT code type and the XT code address, are completely moot if we restore the opcodes and keep them in the container as well as in plain bytecode. And the pay opcode is a separate discussion, but it no longer becomes essential if we have access to the old call series opcodes. So that we would need to know before we start in earnest EOF DevNet 2, but since we're not planning on launching EOF DevNet 1 until Pectra ships, it's a discussion we have time to have.
Okay. I guess like, yeah, it seems like, oh yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Tim. Yeah, from our side, I basically like took over the conversation from the red team. Didn't have a huge conversation with the team and made the call for us. If I have like a day, I can collect the team's opinion and like have a formative, updated view on basically what the two paths look like for us is either EOF without the introspection bands, or given that we have the Charles EAP, like do swap, do 17 to 32 and call it a day. I think these are the two most credible paths. And that's what I would invite every team to sleep on and like have a response, not in 1 or 2 weeks, but like, you know, by tomorrow probably.
Or I mean, okay, so if you think that's reasonable, then like on the testing call on Monday, we could be able to make a call on this.
Yeah. 2 weeks is like too slow.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I agree. 2 weeks feels like a really long time, but okay, that's. And then I guess, does any team disagree with that? Does any team feel like they would need way more time to research this, or already has like a very strong opinion today that they feel it's the right path? Okay, if that's the case, then let's move to the RISC-V conversation, and then yeah, tentatively try to resolve this by Monday. Yeah, and okay, sorry. And before we do that, just to Ansgar's question, the best resource on the exact proposed change. So the specific EOF change that's being proposed is going from the current version to what is listed in option D on the doc I just shared. And then do you know the number for Charles's EIP, Georgios, off the top of your head? Or I guess we have Charles here. 7907. Seems to be something that the rest team would consider as an alternative. Yeah. So yeah, do client teams feel comfortable to like review this and the impact on the developer experience and have a formed view? Yeah, by Monday.
I mean, since somebody brought up push zero, an advantage of EOF over just a raw change to the EVM is EOF contracts will fail to deploy on like an L2 that hasn't got EOF, whereas adding the opcodes to the EVM will deploy on L2 and then fail at runtime.
Yeah, the issue is that if you have two different versions of the source code, the difference between the EOF and the non-EOF code is going to be more subtle than just faulting or not. For example, if pay ships with EOF but not with non-EOF, there's going to be two different kinds of send idioms, and they're going to behave differently, and the fault scenarios are going to it's going to be like reentrancy versus non-reentrancy.
And option D, remove that subtlety because you'll be using the same call operations as you would in plain bytecode.
Okay. And yeah, someone posted the issue in the chat for the testing call. I think it would be good if either Dano or Ben, you want to just write up a quick summary of like, yeah, the different options, and then links for the specs for people to review. And then on Monday, we make a final decision on this, which hopefully doesn't affect, yeah, the next, well, I mean, it'll affect the next couple of days, but we won't lose a 2-week testing cycle over it. Okay. Anything else on this specific issue before we move to risk 5? Okay. Yeah, thanks everyone. I realize this is kind of a last minute curveball, but it is what it is. So yes, next up, like client, you wanted to yeah, bring up the risk 5 issue.
Yeah, I mean, I was just trying to gauge the sentiment from other client teams. Basically, there was a post from Vitalik talking about what we could imagine the farther future of execution in Ethereum looks like. And I think for the most part, if we think about what we want to accomplish in the next 5 or 10 years with execution, clearly having zero knowledge proofs of the execution is important. And it seems like from his post and a lot of other ZKP teams, they want to rely more and more on risk 5 or something of that shape. And in the past, like we've said, EOF is better for ZK proving, and that seems true. But we're talking about marginal improvements over legacy, 10, 20, 30% improvements, and they're talking about risk 5 being orders of magnitude faster. So if we're already talking about switching to a different execution substrate, and we haven't even shipped EOF, I worry about the amount of work that client teams are putting in. I worry about the work the community is going to have to put in just to support EOF, when in a few years, we're going to say, we really want to do risk 5 now because we need to support zero knowledge proving. And we deprecate all of that work.
Lucas?
Yeah, so I think like potentially risk 5 would give us 2 benefits, right? One is the potential performance improvements that we're talking about. And the second one is potentially tapping to some broader tooling that we could use, right? In Ethereum. So addressing those one by one. Performance improvements, I think we can get close to those numbers if we stop interpreting EVM bytecode in those ZK provers, which I think that is currently being done. So it's being interpreted there, and do some kind of ahead of time compilation potentially. And there are already attempts of doing that, right? There is AVMC, there is ILEVM in Nevermind that we're working on. The big problem here is that the classical bytecode, the current bytecode, is not really friendly to this kind of solutions. The problem is that it's just one big bytecode and you emit tens of thousands of opcodes. And this is really like any compiler will just stop optimizing it. Like say it's too big, it cannot optimize it. Oh, EOF solves it in a way because it's can provide a structure. It can provide different subroutines, and those subroutines will be a lot smaller. So there's a potential benefit of EOF with this approach. So that's one way of solving the performance thing that we can use, but it doesn't probably solve the tooling question. So the tooling actually goes the other way around. It makes the tooling a way more complex rather than simpler, because we need to support this tooling. That's a downside and an upside, right? For now, I think the Ethereum core developers had a lot control over what's going on in Ethereum, and if we like just go with external tooling, we somewhat lose this control. But this might be a good thing or a bad thing. So yeah, that's kind of I see an alternative. I just don't know which one would be better. And that do we want to go to a very, let's say, low level risk v bytecode, or do we want to stay on a quite high level abstract domain focus bytecode that we have full control of? That's the question for me.
Thanks. Let's do Andrew and Guillaume.
Yeah, maybe it's a stupid question, but why don't we turn the entire EVM into
have EVM executed at, some small multiple of the cost of RISC-V native, then maybe that's okay. But in general, people will want to deploy to the lowest cost environment. And if we're going to use RISC-V or something else like RISC-V as the basis for zero knowledge proofs, it's hard to imagine that people are going to pay extra to deploy to interpreted or a compiled version of a higher level system when they could simply deploy to RISC-V.
I see.
Guillaume?
Yeah, so for having tried to compile, that's not my main point, but just wanted to add, having tried to compile EVM1 to RISC-V, this is more difficult than you imagine. There's a lot of C++ dependencies. Okay, actually the problem was RISC-V 32. There's a lot of lacking headers and things that make it very difficult. Yeah, so I don't think it's that easy. But the main point I wanted to make is I think everybody will agree I'm hardly the defender of EOS, but I think it's the wrong reason to not do EOS because RISC-V. I see ZKVMs. There's a lot of people in ZKVMs that are actually considering switching to WASM. Okay, a lot might be exaggerated, but at least a couple. I don't know if RISC-V is really the perfect ISA for ZK applications, and I fear that doing, it's the same problem. Like we want to. There's this new shiny thing on the horizon, and we would give up on doing something that we could do now, so that we potentially get something in the future. But there are so many moving parameters that yeah, we don't know which future we'll get to. So once again, not a big EOF fan, but I don't think this is why we should not have EOF.
Just to, respond to that very quickly, I think in general, I agree with you on that point that we shouldn't let the shiny things in the future always dictate what we can do now. But I think unlike many protocol changes, when you change the user space, you put a massive burden on the entire user base and community. And we need to hold those types of changes to a higher standard than changing a database or changing the way the consensus protocol works.
Fair point.
I guess to that point though, like, what's the timeline on which this would happen? Because like, Ethereum is 10 years old now, give or take. We're going to change the VM for like the first time significantly. Like, do we expect to ship RISC-V in like 3 years or 5 years or farther than that? And yeah, my skepticism would be like, if we think we're ready to do this is in 3 years, realistically, it means we're probably shipping it in like 5 years. And that feels really hard to weigh it against something we can ship in like 6 months. as there'll probably be many other problems we have to deal with between like now and when we do this. But
Sure, but then you just have the overhang for every formal verification engineer who wants to build a tool, or every static analysis engineer that wants to build a tool, or compiler developers that want to build compilers only focus on EOF, that there might have this end of life of the virtual machine, and just a few years down the line, it makes no sense to invest the time and energy into building it.
yeah, I see that. Like, and Vitalik posted 2 to 5 years in the chat. If it was like much closer to 2, I feel like I would agree. If it's like much closer to 5, I feel like there's probably still value in doing this. But yeah, Daniel, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so this isn't the first time that an architecture switch has been proposed for the EVM. EWASM was proposed at DevCon in Prague, of all places, the current hard fork we're shipping. The name of the current hard fork. And there's a lot of lessons that we should look and see why EWASM didn't ship, and make sure that we don't repeat those same problems with RISC-V. There's, we talk about when we don't want to rewrite contracts for EOF. We're going to have to rewrite even more contracts for RISC-V. There's a lot of things that are the same, a lot of things that are different. Performance was an issue in EWASM. Is that unique to EWASM, or is that going to be a general problem with the 256-bit registers? There's a lot of, before we really dive into this, we really should take some time to do a postmortem on EWASM and make sure that if we do move forward with RISC-V, that we can learn from what's been tried before.
Thanks. Donkrad?
I mean, I just want to comment as well, like right now, the way that the prover market develops, I generally don't see proving costs as like a big argument in the future. I think it will be a trivial part of transaction costs. So I just think like it's neither going to be a good argument for EOF nor RISC-V.
And is the implication that like even if we have EOF, we can just create cheap proofs for this as we?
I mean, either way, like I just don't think we should use it as an important argument right now.
Yeah.
Obviously, RISC-V is a very long-term research direction. I think EOF is a different decision. I think the prover cost should have just no bearings on this.
Got it. Yeah, I guess like I was going to ask exactly Richard's question. Yeah, if we adopt EOF now, is the only cost to RISC-V that like some people may have built tooling for it that then gets deprecated, but then if Vitalik has this other comment saying that we can turn the EVM into a smart contract on RISC-V, I assume that's also true of EOF versions of the EVM. So that we would keep supporting that. So,
I mean, it's going to be a maintenance burden, right? Because we would have 3 versions of like three systems to maintain.
Correct. So we have to keep supporting everything we ship forever, all the time. I think this is true for EOF and the legacy EVM, regardless of which path we take. It seems like that decision was like broadly made. But yeah, there will I think over time, it's realistic that there will be different versions of the VM that we will need to support. And then if we go down this path, I guess that the alternative path is you just keep updating the legacy VM forever. And then, yeah, it seems like we were fine with 2. Adding a third on a 5-year time frame doesn't seem like qualitatively different, but maybe that's wrong. Yeah. I guess, yeah, not to like extend this discussion forever. It doesn't seem like there's like a major short-term concern with this. Like there are concerns around long-term tooling support, potentially additional complexity in the clients. I feel like if we are going to make a decision about EOF on Monday, this is like maybe a secondary thing that should be weighted, but it doesn't feel like the primary thing we should base the EOF decision on, especially given the amount of uncertainty around risk 5. Yeah, I don't know, Vitalik, do you have a mic to maybe voice that latest comment?
Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
I
No worries.
do. I was just I could not find the raise hands button, and so I was being polite and not circumventing it. Yeah, again, I get no. So the thing that I was just typing is right. So the way that I think about risk 5 is, I mean, a couple of things, right? So one of them is like one really big thing about risk 5 is like actually sort of the fact that we don't control it, and or I mean obviously like there's many versions of our risk 5 and we'd have to pick one, but we don't control it, and that I actually think that's a benefit in a couple of ways, right? So one is that it means that there's this other ecosystem of a whole bunch of other things that have switched to it, right? And one interesting argument that I heard actually is that there are some developers who are not Ethereum developers right now who might be interested in being Ethereum developers who would love to use the same language on chain and off chain. So kind of like a Node.js type of DevX argument, like it's just much easier when you use the same code on the client and the server, and their off-chain logic is in some traditional language, basically all of which compiles to RISC-V, and so having RISC-V just be available is good in that way. And then the other thing is like it does sort of discipline us into ossification, which I think is a good thing in a lot of ways, right? Like I think if we realistically choose RISC-V, then like there would like the thing's already gone through more than 10 years of people evaluating what opcodes to add and what opcodes not to add, and so it just like it becomes a commitment that if we do it, then that's the thing. And then just from a complexity perspective, like basically, like I think if you add I know I saw like Python 2 and Python 3 get brought up, right? And if you have to ask the question like, do you expose the developers Python 2 and Python 3, or do you expose Python 2 and C++? Then like the second feels more attractive, right? And I think one of the reasons why is that if you expose C++, then developers would still be able to code in Python 3. So those are some arguments. I guess I'm just reading through questions. Will there be lots of precompile syscalls with RISC-V? I mean, I think the answer is probably well, so there's like two kinds of syscalls, right? So there's like syscalls to represent system operations. Like sload, external call, balance, whatever. And those would be turned into syscalls because that's how RISC-V handles everything. And then the other type of like syscall would be actual precompiles, right? And I mean, I would say we should just do precompiles in the same way that we do precompiles now. We would probably need fewer of them because RISC-V is natively much more efficient than the EVM is. But like in general, a big part of the idea is to try to minimize the need or is to try to basically change the VM without changing everything else. And so like you'd be able to interact with other contracts and basically in exactly the same way, right? And so in that case, like we probably don't even need like a new feature for a new type of precompilers. We just like if we have precompilers, like there are a list of addresses that are like from 1 to 10 or 1 to 15 or whatever. And for those precompiles, like if you want to use a precompile, then you just call into that, right? So like that's probably the most natural way to do it. Is RISC-V more efficient? So I think this is one other thing that like we need to start thinking about, right? Which is that there's been a lot of discussion around L1 scaling and increasing the L1 gas limit. And a big part of that for me is that if we're gonna increase the L1 gas limit and like especially go to crazier levels, so like I think I've given the number a couple of times of like 10x in 2026, given sort of some of the relatively basic stuff or watts or whatever for how long it takes to ZK prove. And like if ZK proving becomes the bottleneck, then basically the thing that matters in terms of like how high the L1 gas limit can go just becomes prover efficiency, right? And if prover efficiency actually becomes more important than regular execution efficiency, which seems very like likely, though I think that's something that we should explicitly evaluate, then that's like something that take we should take into account. I don't know, I feel like I've burned through the questions.
I think Kev had a couple more.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah, go
my
ahead.
question was mainly about is the main argument that we need to switch from EVM to a more traditional architecture, or is this even more specific to RISC-V?
I think I personally feel more confident in the first than the second. Like my big picture argument is that it seems like basically all of these ZK EVMs are done by creating a ZK VM for a much simpler VM than the EVM, and then like basically just taking an Ethereum client and sticking it into that VM. And like from what I can tell, they're like almost all done that way, right? And so if a ZK prover is done that way, then like almost for free, we get the ability to just directly expose that underlying VM to smart contract developers. Because as long as we do it right, we get the sandboxing right. Like we just go and expose that directly, and that's just like a massive efficiency increase. So like that's the part that I feel relatively more confident in. I mean, the choice of like RISC-V versus something else. I mean, I know other people like YOLO have Ellie from Starkware have suggested arithmetic friendly VMs like Cairo, and like I think it's good that to have a group of people like seriously exploring that hypothesis. And I think like my own impression after reading people's feedback for a few days is basically that it's either RISC-V or it's something specifically arithmetic friendly, because outside of the specifically arithmetic friendly domain, there just isn't anything remotely close to the level of adoption and like level of work in it the RISC-V has had. But obviously, if it is specifically ZK friendly, then like there's a good argument that that could give significantly higher efficiency or simplicities, and it seems valuable to explore.
I guess one thing to just focus this a bit more is how does this weigh in on EOF? Because we could do a RISC-V switch later on.
Yeah.
Is this also to like not do EOF?
Right. So I think right, so the way that I think about it is that there's like a couple of aspects to sort of quote EOF, right? One of them is specific features that we want to introduce, and then the other is there's this underlying philosophy of future-proofness. So that covers things like versioning, it covers things like code sections, and it covers like even just the underlying idea that we make a new VM where things are much more locked down and so on and so on. And like a lot of the underlying philosophy behind some of those decisions, I feel, was made with the idea in mind that like this would be the end game for Ethereum. But then if the end game for Ethereum that we think makes sense ends up just being let's like switch from the EVM entirely to some like much simpler either RISC-V or like prover oriented VM, then that's like a different end game. And so we should reevaluate how we try to extract some of the like DevX and efficiency benefits that we wanted to get out of EOF for in the short term, right? So like I think there are like the whole like contract code size increase thing is and the extra swap dupes is like a good example of that, right? And like there could be other examples as well.
Thanks. Lucas has his hand up.
Yeah, so for me, it's hard to wrap my head around how this, how the Ethereum in this post RISC-V world with all these knowledge proofs will work. So, in maybe we will get, for example, also RISC-V hardware, but for now, this is the hardware of is not the case. So this RISC-V code still needs to be interpreted. It still needs to be JITed or ahead of time compiled. So what's the benefit here? Except, okay, it's more native to the ZK, the current ZK VMs.
You mean the builders would still have to run interpreters?
Right. Well, builders and nodes that kind of re-execute fully for analytics reasons. And I think a couple of arguments, right? One is that like the provers are a big deal and like they might, and like I think there's a good argument that they will be the primary bottleneck on like how high we can safely raise the gas limit in the future. So that's one. Two is that like there's benefits that are to RISC-V that are not just speed but rather DevX. And three is that like there is a large set of contracts where if you like compile them down into RISC-V, they still become much more efficient. And the way to think about this is that a lot of for almost the average computation, like the average number that the average computation manipulates is a very small number, right? It's like an index, it's 0, it's 1, it's like a program counter, like basically stuff that fits in 32-bit, right? And so the EVM ends up wasting a lot of space by using 256-bit for those, and just the computation ends up being more efficient because in RISC-V would be able to take all of those like index type variables and just treat them as a 32-bit value instead of a 256-bit value.
Okay, maybe just to zoom out a little bit. So if Ansgar had a bunch of comments in the chat around the process, I think a lot of people echoed this. So with regards to how this impacts EOF, there's kind of two paths we can take. One is we assume it broadly doesn't, and there's too high of uncertainty to choose now. So we make a kind of local decision about EOF on Monday. Maybe this is like descoping EOF or keeping it as is, but we just assume that we will not know much more about RISC-V in the short term, and we should be aware that there's like this pending potential like other execution environment. The other path that Ansgar was proposing is, should we have some sort of research sprint around this where we kind of assume we move forward with whatever version of EOF we choose on Monday, but then we have kind of a concerted effort over the next month to like answer some of these questions. I guess with that second path, I'm not sure like what is the thing that we could learn in the next, say, 4 weeks and give us confidence about this decision. Like, it seems like there's many of these uncertainties that are kind of evolving over like months to year timeframes, but are there specific questions that people feel that if we spend 4 weeks, focusing on this, we would actually learn? Yeah, and my sense is like, 4 weeks. If I had to bet, this is more like 4 months than 4 weeks, and then at that point, the cost of waiting for EOF is quite high. Yeah, so look, there's benefits to studying this for 4 weeks, like Ansgar says, but I think here I really want to focus on EOF specifically, not just the entire RIS5 thing. Like, we need to make this decision. I think we could probably delay it a few weeks if we would like learn something quite important in that process. And like, if we're not going to learn that much relevant in the next 4 weeks, specifically regarding EOF, then sure, maybe we can also investigate this, but we shouldn't block our Fusaka scoping decision based on it. Yeah, okay. Okay, so it seems like okay, so it seems like we effectively don't want to couple those decisions. If that's the case, then I would still say let's try to
I
make
think
it.
I think we should consider that in the discussion. They're totally related. It's not possible to think about them in isolation.
Yeah, it's like not free to ship either of these.
Correct. So I guess, okay, but then independent of RISC-V, like, if we assume there probably will be some changes to the EVM in the future, or to like, Ethereum's execution environment in the future, that is something we can like weight as an abstract consideration in the EOF decision. Like, do we want to maintain n equals 2 EVMs today and then have some third thing in the future? That's independent from like the specifics of RISC-V specific, like, and how that would work. Maybe we end up moving to something else, but I don't know that there's much more we'll learn on that topic in like a couple weeks. I feel like by Monday, people will have their opinions set on this at a high level. And then like I would lean towards making a call on Monday about the scope of EOF in Fusaka or not. And this is either we ship EOF as it currently is, and we're okay with libraries having to update, and then the other option is some different version of EOF, and then there's another option that's like we remove EOF and we potentially do some piecemeal EVM improvements in this fork. But I don't think we need to couple this with RISC-V beyond saying EOF is unlikely to be Ethereum's final execution environment endgame. And we should work on getting the final execution environment endgame, but that's going to take months to years.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like with this layered onto the last conversation about whether or not to have introspection, we're not ready. We're not ready to make this decision.
And then, so if we're not, look, we can choose to not do EOF because we're not ready, and potentially just delay it, quote, forever. I think short term though, we should be mindful that it doesn't seem like there's much desire to do this in, say, Amsterdam. So if we don't do EOF in Fusaka, then we should just assume like for the next couple of years, we're not going to be doing this. And maybe there is like some version of EOF we do in 2 years when we have a way better understanding of the EVM endgame, or like the EL endgame. But yeah, if we if we think like the general uncertainty independent of risk 5 is too big, then we can decide to not change anything. But that should be the thing we decide. Yeah.
Yeah, I think while like risk 5 like is relevant to the conversation, like it's very possible we don't learn much in the short term to the point where we have to make a decision on EOF anyways. So
yeah. Okay, so I think by Monday we should make on Monday's testing call, we make a final call about the Fusaka scope for EOF. People can have different estimates of uncertainty, and we should weight that into the decision. But I don't think we should over-index on risk 5 specifically. But we can imagine that something of that magnitude is likely to happen at some point, and that might change whether or not we want to do EOF at all. Does that make sense? And yeah, Justin, just to be really clear, like there is a pure research idea. There's some chance that it actually happens. There's some chance that some version of it happens. There's some chance that something completely different happens in 5 years. And then assuming something were to happen, like, is that, yeah, does that change your decision?
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to say is like, I don't even know how to compare those two things.
Well, it's more, if you know that you're going to have to add this, call it risk 5-esque thing in 5 years, does doing EOF today make a difference? Yeah. And if not, that's fine. Like, I think one argument is like, it kind of doesn't. And like, to the extent we need backwards compatibility with the EVM, we're going to need it with EOF, and we're going to need to write all that tooling anyway. And then to the extent it does, then yeah, maybe having like less, like, yeah, maybe you want to keep a simpler EVM now. Yeah. I do want to wrap this up. Yeah, there is one other important thing we need to talk about today. Again, I think we can continue this discussion offline, but I think I want to talk about the gas limit execution and then maybe the block limit. But on the last all core devs, we said that the other thing we wanted to prioritize for Fusaka is focusing on raising the gas limit. And obviously the gas limit is not part of like the hard fork. People can raise it whenever, whatever, but there is value in coordinating towards actually improving and scaling the gas limit and figuring out what is a safe value that we can update defaults for when the fork goes live. Again, we don't need to wait until the fork to raise the gas limit if we feel like it's kind of safe to increase it. But the idea is that this EIP that I showed in the chat would be like our final backstop, where by the time we ship Fusaka, maybe we realize 80 million gas is fine. And so all the clients ship with 80 million gas, and maybe mainnet is already at like 60 or whatever by that point. And it's been kind of a weird EIP to draft in that it's kind of drafting this almost like an idea that we want to focus on this, but it does feel important to have something like that, because otherwise we will just add a bunch of stuff in the fork and then no one will have time to work on the gas limit, and the gas limit will be the same a year from now than it is today. So I know that, like, yeah, there's still a bunch of comments on the EIP, but at a high level, are people generally happy with moving something like this into Fusaka? And okay, that's just to the point specifically. The thing that's the EIP is saying, like, we don't need one. In theory, there's value in the EIP specifying the default, and there's value of the EIP as like a reminder that we need to do this work. Yeah, and we have had another EIP about the defaults for like the blob counts on the EL side, so it's not like this completely unprecedented thing. Yeah, Ben?
Yeah, I'm good with it because if you look at the gas limit picks, after the after the chain moved to 36 million, basically 45% of it hasn't moved past 30 million. So it'd be good to get people a commitment from CLs and ELs that they will change their defaults to be the new higher limit.
Yes, we will change our defaults at some point.
Dan, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, like I agree that it's like, I mean, doesn't really specify much right now, but like I think that's okay. Can serve as like a important process document for now. If anything, having a EIP like not actually specify things is kind of nice because you don't really have to do anything. So, yeah.
Okay, so then I think the next point. So obviously we didn't get this merged and like done today, but we should get it merged in the next week or so, and then assuming there's no major objections, we can SFI it on the last call. But it does feel like we've talked about this general concept for the past 2 calls, so like I would move forward with it as soon as we have something merged that we're generally happy with. Related to this, one other proposal that's that we should review and then potentially also do towards increasing the gas limit is this idea of adding a cap to the block size at the RLP level, because there is one already on the CL gossip side, and this would help kind of cap things. I don't know if Julio is on the call to give like a 1-minute pitch.
He's not on the call. I can give it. So the CLs won't gossip a block larger than, including the CL part, larger than 10 megabytes. So since you can do a block 0 even with the change in Pectra of all zeros, that would put the safe cap at 100 megagas. The inverse, if it's not zeros, the cap is like 400 million gas, just based on the byte size. So if we put a cap of 10 megabytes minus some margin on block building and say it's an invalid block if it goes over that size, then we no longer have to consider call data going over that size when building blocks. So we can put more execution and have a higher gas limit than 100 million. So for instance, we could do the 150, which was the original suggestion for the default change to investigate. We can do that if we put a cap on the byte size. But it's unsafe if we don't cap the byte size because there is an inherent cap in the CL.
Right. Thanks. And so, okay, I know we're already at time, so I think people should also review this, but we can make a final call on the next call. And I think for this gas limit one, again, it's kind of weird because we said the scope for Fusaka should be finalized, but then if we agree in the abstract to increasing the gas limit, then I expect we will maybe see some minor EIPs like this come in that like actually allow us to do it. So my proposal here would be by the next call, we merge and we SFI the actual gas limit EIP, and then maybe this one as well, but we should be open to small incremental EIPs that actually help us get 100 million gas being added in Fusaka, even if they don't exist today, because we don't know what the actual bottlenecks are. Okay, we're already at time. The last thing on the agenda, so there's some quick updates on history expiry. If people want to stay for an extra minute or two, I think it's probably worth getting on the same page about that, and then we can wrap up. Hyper, are you on the call?
I am. The meta EAP for history expiry is 7927. Take a look at it. Sepolia activation happens on May 1st. If you're an execution layer client team, please get some documentation on any changes to your client behavior published and send me a link to that so that we can aggregate that stuff together to make it easier for node operators to know what is changing in their clients. And there's a link on the PM repo for the meeting today of the ETH clients repository that shows where all of the ERA files are for Sepolia data, for mainnet data, things like that. Take a look at that stuff and get documentation out for how your client is changing based on history drop. That's it.
Thank you. Perry has a question. Which ELs have history dropped for Sepolia in their mainnet releases? Does
I
anyone
believe
have?
I'm aware of Geth and Besu, but a client team should we shouldn't take my word for that.
For Geth, this is not turned on by default.
Okay, so no Besu, no Nethermind, no Geth. Okay. We already at time. When is the next? Is there like a next touch point for history expiry that clients should join to discuss this? If we are doing it in the next 2 weeks.
I'm not aware of any further decisions that need to be made. I believe that all of, please correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that clients should have everything that they need to act on this.
Well, I guess they need a client release. We would need to test this. It would be good to have some like coordination, but what is like the best place for just people to follow up on this? Is it the Discord?
Yep, the Discord history expiry channel. If there's something that you guys need with respect to moving this forward, let me know. To the best of my knowledge, everything about history expiry has been defined and finalized, and client team should be able to act on it.
Okay. Okay, let's follow up on the history expiry channel. I know we're already a bit over time, so any final thing people want to cover? Okay, if not, well, thanks everyone. So yes, reminder, Monday's call, we will make a final decision about EOF and then go from there. And please review these gas limit EIPs as well in the next few days. We'll try to get them merged next week. Yeah, thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you.